I hate Claymores. They're slow, they're clunky, and this weapon type always seems to come out with the worst characters in the game. Excluding Mawika, Mygoat Navia, and Kinich, this class of weapons is absolutely bottom of the barrel. And that's why I'll be beating Genshin Impact with my second least favorite type in the game, Claymores. So let's get into the rules of this challenge. Rule number 1. I can only use Claymore characters. Duh. Rule number 2. Outside of the first parts of Mondstadt, trial characters won't be allowed, obviously excluding the ones for primos. Rule number 3. Co-op is allowed, but only if everyone else uses Claymore characters, and most people aren't going to do that, so basically no co-op. And finally, rule number 4. This account will be completely free to play, because I don't want to spend any more money on this game, and it will take away from the fun of the challenge. So let's get into it. So after we get kidnapped by Asmodee and get taken to Mondstadt by totally not Asmodee, we encounter our first challenge, the slimes. Normally, the game wants you to use your elemental skill and burst, but if you haven't noticed, Lumine is a sword user, so we can't do that. Even if you kill the slimes, the game still won't count it unless you use the skill and the burst. But thanks to a technique our weapons only founding father discovered, we can just use the skill behind the statue and all will be good. So that's what I did. I used the skill behind the statue, I used the burst behind the statue, and the slimes died. So after we get through that, we head towards the city, but then we get stopped by a bow user, Amber. Ew. As far as I know, there's no cheese for this part of the tutorial, so let's just pretend Mawika threw her Claymore at the slime to help us out. So we kill the slime, and for some reason, we decide we want to help Amber clear out some hilichurls. Luckily, all I have to do is lure the hilichurl over to the campfire and let it cook itself, and just repeat that for the second wave of enemies. After 10 minutes of dealing with that, we finally make it to Mondstadt. Since there is no rest for the wicked, we immediately get swept up by the wind and have a mini battle with Devalin, but we scare him away for a bit. We get invited to the Knights of Favonia's headquarters and finally unlock the wishing system. Obviously, I pull on the beginner banner to get the guaranteed Noel, and somehow a Janling. Wrong account. I took everyone else out of the team and leveled up Noel a bit before proceeding with the rest of the Archon quest. First, we headed off to Amber's domain. I went in the domain, remembered we needed a pyro character, then left to pick my free standard 5-star. I was putting off claiming them for a bit because I didn't know which one to pick, but ultimately I went with Thea because I prefer her playstyle just a tiny bit more. After putting her on the team and leveling her up, we went right back into Amber's domain with a usable pyro character. The domain was pretty much smooth sailing from there, so off to Kaya's domain. Thankfully, cryo isn't needed for the domain. You can just hop over the spikes, which I did. Eventually. Now time for Lisa's domain. And listen, I was just going through the motions and wasn't really thinking during this domain, so when I was presented with the problem of the Electro Monument, I figured wishing would be the solution, which doesn't sound out of place for a gacha game. However, I made a couple mistakes during the pulls. I didn't have enough acquaintance for a 10 pull on the beginner banner, but I did have enough intertwined fates for a 10 pull on the limited. And since Aina was on the banner, I felt okay pulling in case I got her early, cause Hydro is always nice to have. So I did a 10 pull on the banner, got a 5 Claymore which is pretty nice, and instead of converting all of the Stardust to acquaints, I converted it into 2 acquaints and 1 intertwined. I did the single pull on the limited and surprisingly got a 4-star, but it was the wrong one. It was Goro. And since I didn't think this through, I didn't have enough wishes to pull on the beginner banner. I tried to do some more exploration to get more wishes, but considering the fact that Mondstadt wasn't even fully unlocked, I couldn't do much. So after exploring for a bit, I just accepted the fact that I really messed up. It wasn't until I was starting my Bulls Only account when I remembered, and I kid you not, I was in the middle of a Danganronpa breakdown video while doing Amber's domain, when I remembered the Lisa domain skip. So I hurried and tried it on that account, got it in like 5 tries, then hurriedly switched back to this account, ready to skip Lisa's domain. And skip Lisa's domain I did. Eventually. Following my triumph in the Lisa domain, the next step is to continue the Archon quest. However, that requires AR10, and the account was at AR9. Since it's the early game, leveling up is easy. And since we just unlocked the Adventurer's Handbook, it was as easy as claiming everything in the handbook. Upon reaching AR10, we got 10 more standard pulls in the mail, and obviously, it was time to do our last 10 pull on the beginner's banner. Surprising to no one, we didn't get Beto. Instead, we got Official. And once again, wrong account Hoyo. There were still some leftovers, so of course I did some wishes on the standard and managed to get a Yantfe. Thanks, I guess. I did a little more grinding for the handbook and ended up unlocking commissions. But the Wi-Fi was getting real bad, so I stopped for the day. And after a few days of claiming commission rewards and codes, I came back ready to complete the Mondstadt Archon quest and story quest. Starting off with Amber's quest. I did the gliding trials easily, but silly old me forgot that this game likes to hijack our cameras, so on the way to the headquarters of the Knights of Favonius, our precious Noelle fell out of the sky and died. Thanks, Otto. We proceeded to Springvale to do the investigation part of the quest, but couldn't get far because of the Janling story quest. So we changed course and did the Janling story quest instead. It was fairly easy, but it was a lot of running up and down until it was time for the domain. Surprisingly, you can clear the first part of the domain by having the user skill, run to the door immediately and just barely squeeze through. But when it came time to do the second Pyro Monument, her skill couldn't reach that far, so we had to have a little help from Goba. But I'm sure in his days of godhood, he used a Claymore, so can we really count that? Despite that, we can clear the rest of the domain using just the Claymore crew, because Dia's skill has enough AoE to activate the monuments, and the rest is just fighting. Following that, we head back to Springvale, help Janling with the contest and finish her story quest. Back to Amber's we go. We finally continue the investigation, and eventually we are led to the domain. The first part was easy as we just carry out an aerial assault on some hilly trails, but then we reach a point where they clearly want us to shoot them off the platform. Somehow, I managed to hop on a ledge and get close to them, but neither Dia's skill nor Noelle's burst could hit them, so unfortunately, I have to bring out the bow. I have a strong feeling that if a certain Pyro Archon was on the account, she could have managed to do it, but she is not, so we just have to keep moving forward. This domain just continued to beat me down, forcing me to pull out the bow user for the next 2 sections. But after that, everything was clearable with just Claymores. Not that it mattered at that point. Next up, we have Kaya's quest, subsequently starting another fetch quest. The first part was easy as it was just climbing up a windmill, but the second section needed Cryo to activate the monuments. I tried getting a swirl with the Anemo and Cryo slimes, but it wouldn't work, so I just had to pull out the Cryo sword guide to do it. Once again, it sucked because if there was a Eula or Femini on the account, it could have been done, but alas. The rest of the quest went on just fine because there was no Cryo needed beyond that point. Despite there being Pyro slimes, it was easy to handle thanks to Noelle. With Kaya's story quest completed, it was time to head back to the Knights of Favonius headquarters to start Lisa's quest. Of course, the walking around part was easy because it's just walking, but the domain. I'm sure you can guess what happened here. Yup, I had to use Lisa to progress, and as if that wasn't bad enough, the fight with the Hydro and Cryo slimes were so annoying because I kept getting frozen. After completing it the second time, the Claymore girls, mostly Noelle, quickly took care of the Cryo Abyss Mage. After finishing Lisa's quest, it was actually time to continue the Archon quest. Actually, we got to meet Jean and end up with the title of Honorary Knight. Then we start to look for Venti and end up being convinced to steal the Holy Lyre de Hermel. Breaking into the chapel was pretty easy, especially since I didn't bother with the chest, but of course, The Fatui lady stole it first and we ended up being caught. So we had to make our escape to Angel's Share. Somehow, I managed to miss the first wind ring, but I still made it in time. After a little meeting with Dilu, Jean, and Venti, we made our way to the Fatui domain to reach the lyre, and thankfully, the child character was a Claymore user. Unfortunately, the last enemy was a Pyro Fatui agent, but it wasn't that bad, cause Diluc's physical damage was pretty good. We head back to Angel's Share, purify the lyre a bit, then start looking around for the rest of the Valin stairs. The first one was at the Thousand Winds Temple, and we had to fight a ruin guard to get it. I can't lie, it was tougher than expected, but it was defeated nonetheless. The second tier was in a domain, and there were no elemental restrictions, so our two-woman team was just fine. We took some time dealing with the Pyro Slimes, then hopped further into the domain where we had to fight a Pyro Abyss Mage. It took some time and it hurt a little bit, but once again, we handled it. That fight made me realize we were weak, so I took a quick minute to get some Valbears to level Noelle. And since claiming a 5-star standard character gives you the mats needed to level them to 60, Dia already had what she needed, so I leveled the girls up and threw on some artifacts cause why not? Since I got some pulls, I did a wish on the standard banner and managed to get a 4-star early, but it was Kojo Sara. Once again, wrong account Genshin. After that quick detour, we made our way over to Dadopa Gorge and quickly took care of the enemies there. Did I even need to do that? No, but at least it's done. Since all the tiers were gathered, it was time to reconvene at the winery. After cleansing the tiers, it was now time to play for Storm Terror at Star Snatch Cliff, so that's where we went. Venti tried talking to his old friend, but the abyssal corruption was too much and it failed, so Storm Terror fled to his lair. Following another group meeting, we skedaddled on over to Storm Terror's lair, and it was time to break the seals. Of course, the first one I went to was the one with a Pyro Abyss Mage. The two hilly trails were fine, but because I didn't have Noelle's burst up, I just couldn't break the shield on the Abyss Mage, so I failed the challenge the first go around. After that embarrassment, I fought some nearby hilly trails, got Noelle's burst ready, and went back to the seal and took care of the mage. The other two skills were pretty easy. It was basically a scavenger hunt, and once I found the things for both the seals, it was time to fight a dragon. The Claymore crew did just fine in the fight. A bit tedious, but just fine. Since they had tons of energy, this fight took them breaking the shield 4 times to defeat the Valin, thanks to our MVP Noelle and her burst. She is truly the hero of Mondstadt and they need to knight her already. We return to the city and start wrapping up the quest. We speak to Amber, some NPCs, Kaya. We return the lyre, then we witness Venti getting his gnosis stolen from Senora. We find the little green boy at Windrise, and after recording for 4 hours doing the story quest and the Archon quest, we finally finished Mondstadt. Now it's off to Liyue. Since the Grandmaster is about to appear on Banner, and apparently Eula too, I have about 3 days to grind out Lantern Rite so I can get them both. Also, I got a standard wish off screen, so I did a wish and got Kave. That's all for the first episode of Claymores Only. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time.